Got a quorum?
Tony's on his way too. Yeah, I saw him downstairs. Yeah.
Lights, camera, action. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for the City of Oklahoma City's Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Very good. Let's begin the meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Okay.
Motion approved. Item 3A, items for consideration, street resurfacing project, Brock Miller.
Welcome to our first Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting in several months. We will have project updates in each category as usual, as well as a preliminary report for the Britton District. The agenda also includes a presentation on funding considerations, as well as the consideration of additional distribution of excess collections. Lastly, a review of the 2021 annual report will provide a snapshot of the program's accomplishments to date. If the board would indulge me briefly, we have always tried to approach our work together as a team, and as such, we have kept the board updated on any changes in city personnel. We are saddened to report that in March, we lost City of Oklahoma City staff person Susan Atkinson, who passed after a brief illness. Susan had spoken to the board on a number of our street enhancement projects, and she was a true professional who cared passionately about the district she represented and the community she served. If you will keep Susan's family in your prayers, we would appreciate it. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns during our proceedings today, please stop us and we will do our best to address them. I'd like to introduce Brock Miner to present item 3A, street resurfacing projects.
Good morning. Here's the first slide. We start with our current funding percentages in each category. As you see in our agenda, we do have an item F where we'll have a more broader discussion of the program funding. And this is item 3A1 in our agenda, the street resurfacing projects. And here's our project status map. Major items of note. You know, we had all the projects either complete or in construction, and we have added some that are in the blue category in the design. These are the projects that the board approved the last meeting to coincide with some other funding, and hopefully we'll have all those projects in construction, you know, by the end of the summer. Any questions on street resurfacing? If not, I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank y'all.
Hey, I'm sorry for being a little bit late. I did have one street resurfacing question. I did notice that after Walker had been resurfaced and striped with a bike lane a couple of months ago, it was torn up and done again. Could you elaborate on that and why it was needed to be done again?
During construction on that part of Walker, there was a little bit of failure on some part. You know, there was an old center island with that was brick, you know, and it had been resurfaced, and when we proof rolled and milled, everything looked good, but then when the finished product was there, we just weren't 100% happy, and so we dug that portion out and came back, and then we did, you know, negatively impact some of the bike facility striping, and so we're going to go back in and clean all that up.
Okay, great. I'm kind of curious if there might be other instances in the future where we might also come to the conclusion at finish that we're not completely satisfied and need to re-dig it up again. And my concern is just making sure we're using our funds as efficiently as possible and making sure we do it right from the start.
Say that one more time.
My concern is hoping that we can do it right from the start as opposed to getting to the end and seeing it needs to be redone.
Absolutely. I think our intention is always to do it right the first time. We just weren't completely happy, and it had nothing to do with the bike facility. It was
Right.
just that center part of the road had a little bit of wave in it, and we really wanted to get in there and make that right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3B1 is the project updates for the street enhancement projects. As Brock showed you the map for resurfacing, here is the map for street enhancements. As previously reported, the Northwest 10th Vermont Street Enhancement Project is complete. The Northwest 39th Street Enhancement Project has reached substantial completion, and the district hosted their annual festival and parade this past weekend. We are currently waiting on OG&E to relocate a utility pole, which will then allow us to complete a short section of sidewalk and some adjacent landscaping. The Northwest 10th Council to Rockwell and Meridian Northwest 16th to Northwest 26th Street Enhancement projects are both in construction, and staff is working with the district on the scope of work for the Plaza Street Enhancement project with a targeted start date of mid-July. The Paseo, Walker, Portland, and Stockyard Street Enhancement projects are all three working on final plans, and we hope to be able to bid these projects late in the calendar year of 2022. If you remember the Automobile Alley preliminary report, the engineer predicted construction budget would cover 4 to 5 blocks, and the district prioritized starting at Northwest 10th and working south. I am pleased to report the project was assigned some additional CIP money, and it is now believed the construction can extend all the way to Northwest 4th Street. We have communicated with the board previously that the Northeast 23rd Street Enhancement Project is thought to be underfunded and will therefore be a prime candidate for additional funding consideration. We believe the information discussed during the funding options portion of today's agenda will set the stage for a subsequent action to allocate additional funding to this project. The Britain Old Town Street Enhancement Project was the last street enhancement project to be recommended by the board and approved by the City Council, and the preliminary report will be presented to the board as the next item on the agenda. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
I got one question. On Automobile Alley, can you clarify sort of what the scope settled in on? I know there was some back and forth conversation with the district association and merchants on what they could get with street enhancements versus some of the other resources they have.
Okay. The district ultimately endorsed the 2 lanes in each direction. So northbound you have the streetcar lane and then another travel lane, and then southbound you have 2 travel lanes. When the engineer originally looked at that, it was thought that we could probably construct 4 to 5 blocks with the available budget. The city manager did make some additional CIP funding available, and with that funding, it's now believed that we can do likely the full 6 blocks from 10th all the way down to 4th.
Okay, so it'll get that entire scope that the district was supporting done is what we're anticipating,
Yes.
or unforeseen.
I think the thing, not only does the additional funding get us kind of all the way down to 4th, it gives us the potential to bid the block from 10th up to Park Place as an alternate. So we're currently working on final plans now.
Right. I think it's I'm excited to hear that because I know that there was a lot of thought about on the district's behalf to see what they could do sort of to contribute as far as the street side amenities. So I'm happy that it sounds like we'll be able to get most of the street work done, and then they can come alongside the sidewalk amenities and those kind of things.
They've been a really good group to work with and been very committed.
All right, one last question is, so will this be a dedicated lane for the streetcar on Broadway?
No.
Okay.
The vehicles can continue to travel in it. I think as we talked about various lane configurations, I think that was something that kind of was confusing at different points. The streetcar lane will always have a streetcar and traffic in it, but there will be a second lane for traffic northbound as well.
Yeah. It's my dream one of these days that we'll get some dedicated transit lanes, but for another day, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Just to follow up on Mr. Thompson's thread about cost associated with Automobile Alley, I recall in February, the preliminary design indicated the city standard of parking spaces going from an 18-foot depth to a 20-foot depth.
Yes.
And so as part of the Automobile Alley street enhancement, there would be money to move the curb line into the sidewalk 2 feet to update those 18-foot parking spaces to 20-foot.
Yes.
And especially when the community, the stakeholders were very interested in primarily focusing on pedestrian safety and comfort. Has there been any further discussion with the stakeholders about the fact that sidewalk space would be taken away at cost, as opposed to potentially keeping the 18-foot parking spaces and saving some money?
I think the geometry that drove those decisions, Mr. Carfang, was maintaining 11-foot drive lane widths and then the city's current standard for parking stall depth. I think the district was willing to essentially narrow up sidewalks to be able to accommodate those configurations. I think the narrowest that sidewalk goes on the west side of the road is 8 feet, and that's actually a width that's consistent with various portions of the east side as well. Throughout the project, the district was able to achieve larger bump outs at the corner intersections to try to be able to address shorter crossing distances for pedestrian safety crossing the road. But you're exactly right, just the sheer amount of space available did require narrowing up the sidewalk for that north-south travel path slightly. It was about a 2-foot narrowing.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that feedback.
If there are no other questions on street enhancement projects in general, we'll move to item 3B2, which is the preliminary report for the Britton Old Town District. Although Britton was established as a railway station in the late 1800s and eventually annexed by the city of Oklahoma City in 1950, it is one of the younger districts in the metro area. Strong leadership is capitalizing on the area's historic roots and work ethic to create an achievable vision for economic and community vitality. The limits of the street enhancement project are currently set as Britton from Western to Chartel, and a 2017 GO bond project will resurface Britton from Western to Broadway Extension. Early drawings included in the preliminary report show the design for the Britton and Western intersection being modified to clarify lane configurations for both east and northbound traffic. In addition, standardized parking layouts framed by enlarged bump outs will combine with pedestrian-activated crossings at the Ollie and Classen intersections to enhance pedestrian safety throughout the district. The project will also have the design team work with the district to study Classen Boulevard south of Britton for future possible uses, including a potential connection to the forthcoming citywide bicycle project. The project emphasizes the use of landscaping, lighting, and amenities to reinforce the concept of placemaking, and the initial cost estimate shows the project to be in line with the fixed limit of construction. I will be glad to try to answer any questions that you have. Mr. Thompson?
One question, well, maybe more than one, but so I'm assuming this work is to be done after the GO bond work?
We actually would like to look at doing them both together, Mr. Thompson, just to kind of eliminate, I'm sorry, I keep hitting it, just to eliminate the impact on the district.
Okay, so then they would actually happen concurrently? Okay.
That is what we would like to do, and again, decisions like that, obviously we'll make a recommendation, but the districts have input into a discussion like that, as well as time that a project would start and that sort of thing.
Okay, and then at the intersection, because it wasn't exactly clear, the Western and Britain intersection, which is super complicated for all the reasons with the railroad crossing there. Is there any physical infrastructure that's going to change, or is it just the striping and sort of?
No,
markings?
we've actually reached out to the railroad and started the discussion there. I think the early thought process would be that eastbound traffic on the west side of the intersection, the far south lane, would change to a right turn only. So what would happen, you would no longer carry through the intersection going eastbound and then run into that merge lane that dies out so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think doing that for northbound traffic, then that gives you the opportunity to address that slip lane and possibly go ahead and bump that corner out and kind of clean, the whole area up. Again, the district has been really involved in making those recommendations. Our engineer, at the point of preliminary report, physically, the things the district has asked for if possible, and now we're in the process of working with the railroad to see what would be allowed.
Great, thank you.
So I know this is purely just a Western to Chartel or for resurfacing Western to 235 project, but going further west from Penn to Lake Hefner, the villages have installed multi-use paths pretty much the length of that. And so is there any potential, just sort of looking down the pipeline beyond Better Street, Safer City, of connecting Old Town Britain all the way to Penn, to the villages, so that people who might be living or visiting the Old Town area could access Lake Hefner by bike?
I think that's the challenge, and I kind of from my position, I think staff does a good job with it. I do know that Britain has some funding, I believe, in the MAPS 4 program, and staff has already been looking maybe at what the limits of a project like that would look like. With respect to just the street enhancement, I know one of the district's requests was potentially to look at maybe like extending street lighting further west as a possible alternate. So I think if I could answer your question by saying it is on people's radar, I think it's always the goal to try to be able to connect between existing projects or even forthcoming projects. I think that was the comment maybe about the citywide bike project and using Classen potentially to go down and connect to it. So I do think that that's something that staff welcomes kind of public input and is always looking for the ability to partner on a project.
Perfect. I appreciate that.
Is there any further discussion on any of this?
I did note in one particular picture of the design, looking at angled parking. I know this isn't currently signed as a bike route, but would there be possibility, even just from a car-to-car collision standpoint, to look into reverse angled parking here too?
It has not been looked at in that manner yet, Mr. Carfang. I do think that we have looked particularly at the block between Classen and Chartel to perhaps kind of extend the lane configuration further east through that block, which would probably then give angled parking, hopefully angled parking, against the health clinic side of the street. So, we can certainly take a look at it. I don't think that has been examined at this point. I think the goal to this point has been trying to standardize parking as much as possible.
Sure, and especially with reverse angled parking, currently not necessarily being all that adhered to on 39th Street yet. I feel like having reverse angled parking as opposed to forward angled parking, the standard would help expedite education and awareness and usage of that standard.
The use so far on 39th has been interesting. You hear lots of horn honking and that sort of thing, but hopefully we get the hang of it.
Yeah, thanks.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
You have to say that it passed.
Motion passed. Item 3C, sidewalk update project.
Yeah, this brings us to item 3C1 in our agenda, the sidewalk projects. As you see, the majority of all of our projects are complete. The only one still in construction is the downtown sidewalks, and it's really wrapping up. That was kind of brief, but that's really all I had on the sidewalks. I'm sorry.
There's a theme for your presentations.
Yeah, I know, yeah. I'll say more in trails, I promise. If that's it, I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank you.
I wish I had the same presentation as Brock for bike. Bike infrastructure project updates will make up item 3D1. As, again, you see the map. As reported in past meetings, the Villa North, Independence Grand, Spring Lake, and Indiana Linwood bike projects are all under design. The Southwest 25th project is currently in construction. Work on the Chartel project, as well as the west and east ends of the General Pershing project, have been completed. Perhaps the biggest updates within the bicycle facilities category lie with the middle section of General Pershing, i.e. Main Street from Penn to Western, and Lottie Avenue. The petitioning process of stakeholders on Main Street regarding the removal of parking on the north side of the street to allow for the creation of a 3-lane section with dedicated bike lanes has been completed and submitted to traffic management for review. Likewise, the petitioning process is being readied for stakeholders on Lottie to remove parking in various areas to facilitate the implementation of dedicated bicycle lanes along that route. It is expected that Lottie will feature the city's first parking protected bicycle lanes, and the petition is anticipated to be completed in summer of '22. I would be happy to take any questions you might have on bike projects.
I will say with regard to the General Pershing, Main, Western area, and then in combination with the Western Bond project, the intersection of Main and Western looks fantastic the way it's redone. And I've had a chance to luckily bike by as construction crews have been out, and they have been, whenever I talk to them, super excited and prideful in the work that they're doing. So just really uplifting.
Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Brock for item 3E1, trails.
Thank you, Mike. Here's our project status map. Some major items of note. I think the Hefner Trail is under construction and moving right along. The I-44 bridge rehab is wrapping up, and so this is going to give us an opportunity to get back in there and finish the section that has not been completed yet on the North Oklahoma River Trail. My understanding, the signage is moving along really well. A lot of the larger monument signs are up. They have a few left to do on some different trails, but the majority of them are complete, and they're also working diligently on the parking directional signage. So my understanding is all of that is going really, really smoothly. They said that hopefully that'll wrap up late summer, early fall. Deep Fork, the ODOT has finished their review on everything, and so this is going to give us an opportunity that hopefully we can bid that around 60 days and award everything in 90 days and get construction going on several phases of the Deep Fork. And those were the major things I have. Any other questions on any of the trails?
Do we have a timeline on, I know there are 5 parts of the Deep Fork Trail. Do we have any kind of timeline? Do we think that completion of those, or any speculation as to when that will happen? How's that?
I can get you that information. I think hopefully if those are awarded in 90 days, hopefully construction on each phase, I'm guessing here, but I could find out for sure. But, probably 4 to 6 months on each phase, but some of the phases are a lot more difficult than the others. And so I think getting it into construction is the big first step, but hopefully it'll complete pretty soon.
Will all the phases be worked on at the same time, or are those going to literally be in phases?
My understanding is that phase 1, 2, and 4 will be the first ones to bid, and then phase 3, I made some notes here. Because of the I-235, that may be at a later date, but I think a lot of it is funding as well, which may be a part of our discussion later in item F, but I do think now that ODOT's done with the review, there's a lot of railroad agreements that are in place, and they're working on those, but I can check on that. I can try to get that timeline, but once things get into construction, I'll have a better idea of everything for sure.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions?
Just a really quick note, I do continue to hear positive feedback about the various mile marker strips across the trails. People really like the way that looks.
No, absolutely. I think all the signage stuff is going really, really well. I think they're wrapping that stuff up, and hopefully they'll continue to get all those things in place. I know some of the signage, the frames are already going up, and then the phase 2 on some of the different signs, the kind of the wayfinding signage. Most of all of the frames are set up, and so you should see a lot of that wayfinding information coming really, really soon. If that's it, I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank y'all.
Item 3F1 is a presentation to the board on various funding considerations. As a reminder, the board has been meeting regularly since early 2018. The sales tax levy supporting the Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Program ended March 31st, 2020. At this point, the board has considered engineering reports for all the street enhancement projects except Northeast 23rd, which, as stated earlier, is thought to be underfunded. The Public Works Finance Department has recently completed an audit of all allocated projects, and a budget giveback is being ready to facilitate the board recommending funding into new or existing projects. Staff currently proposes a series of actions that over the course of 2 meetings would allow the board to make recommendations to the City Council that would fulfill the board's role in advising the council regarding projects funded by the sales tax. After the board's obligations have been met and the board retired, any future City Council actions would simply move from director approval to the City Council for their consideration. Those actions would start today with a recommendation on a second distribution of revenue collected beyond the original projection. It would be followed at the next meeting with the aforementioned budget giveback from projects across all categories and recommendations from the board on how to reallocate those funds into new or existing projects. These actions would conclude with a preliminary report for Northeast 23rd, along with any visits to other projects the board wishes to examine closer. Before I move forward with the funding presentation, does anyone have any questions or comments? As I stated, the Public Works Finance Department has completed an audit of all projects allocated to a category in the sales tax program. Please look first at the current allocations table. In the left column titled Approved Allocation, you will see the amount of funding allocated in each of the categories. The column on the right, identified as available for project assignment, projects an amount based on the budget giveback currently being prepared that can be recommended for funding new or existing projects. Now please scan down to the excess collections table. Based on the financial summary that will be presented later in the meeting, an additional $5.6 million is available to be recommended by the board for allocation into one or more categories. Any funding from the excess collections recommended to a category will increase the total for that category in the available for projects assignment column by the amount recommended. So for example, if $1 million was recommended from excess collections to resurfacing, that $12.2 million number would increase to $13.2 million. I've probably made that clear as mud, so I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that the board has. We will now move to item 3F2. The recommendation in your packet is to move $2,676,528 to street enhancements, $2 million to trails, and $1 million to an operating and maintenance reserve / sales tax reconciliation budget. The latter would be an ongoing allocation to facilitate any adjustments with this tax collection process, as well as an endowment to provide for maintenance or remediation of the amenities installed as part of a sales tax project. Examples of maintenance or remediation might be to repair a district marker, replace or add delineators, or to clean a biodetention pond. Again, I would try to answer any questions that you would have.
I got one question about the operating and maintenance reserve. So is that a overall fund, or is this creating that reserve?
I'm going to answer this, and hopefully I don't make it more confusing, Mr. Thompson. So when the board looked at a previous excess collections distribution, we essentially withheld $1.2 million for the reconciliation of the tax process. To this point, we have not had to use that. I think just from a conservative standpoint, we would like to continue to hold out $1 million for that. But again, if that process continues to go as it has, we would like to see that kind of category morph over to be more of a maintenance type use. Again, at the director's level, so I think it would always be approved to address issues, related to a sales tax project, but it would just give that ability to really maintain what we have installed.
Yeah. So I think I get that part. So that's clear. Thanks.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm just curious about functionally is are there already maintenance funds sort of set aside that this would go into, assuming that everything reconciles, or this would sort of create a fund kind of to support operations and maintenance for these programs?
This would really be new, Mr. Thompson. I think that's what you see a lot. The city has been very fortunate. Voters approve bond projects, voters approve, maps, initiatives, that sort of thing. We tend to have capital to build, but then to go back and maintain. And as much as we hate it, a drunk driver hits a street light or does something else, I think this gives staff the ability to maintain what the board has overseen.
Yeah, no, I know. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially the way that our city government is run. And I know it does skew conservative, which I think has its benefits as far as how we allocate resources. I know we've learned and put in a lot of these capital improvements into place that the maintenance thing is always the gotcha. And even when you start talking about potholes and things like that, we can build a lot of streets, a lot of infrastructure, but we need to maintain it. So that's what I was curious about, what the thought process was. So I think I understand where it's coming from, and that makes sense. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? I think we believe we need a motion to accept this. Very good. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote. Motion is recommended. Thank you very much. Where are we?
G. Well, there's not anything on G.
And Mr. Johnston, I think in helping Mark compile the packet at one point, I thought I would have an implementation plan for the board to approve today. We do not, based on the items that we have
Very good.
covered. So there won't be an item G.
Thank you, then. Let's proceed.
Good morning, board members. My name is Doug Dowler. I'm the budget director for the City of Oklahoma City. I'm here to present the financial summary. This was as of April 30th, because in terms of trying to prepare the packet, we didn't have a closure on May, so this is slightly dated, but you can see total revenue of $263,676,528. Just kind of as a point of reference, in March, $81,000 in interest was earned by the fund, and $11,000 in sales tax reallocations, as they talked about there. In this case, it was actually added to the balance. So there are times when it is a refund to a taxpayer. Sometimes it's an extra payment. That's kind of what that extra $1 million that Michael mentioned could be added to over the course of the next 7 years. We do reallocations for 7 years, so we've got until 2027 that reallocation process will be going on. At that point, then the amount would be locked in. So again, $263.6 million through April 30th, with expenditures at that point of $168,065,537, encumbrances of $14.6 million. During March, about $1.76 million was expended, paid to contractors. The biggest piece of that being in street resurfacing, about $1.1 million for street resurfacing. And so I did look at the May totals. It's not closed yet, but at this point, fairly similar numbers to April, about $72,000 in earnings or in revenue for the fund, and just under $1 million in expenses there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
I will just point out on this particular slide, it looks like the current allocations does not align with what Mr. Clark had presented previously. In particular, the approved allocation for street resurfacing was 168, and on this slide you're showing 177, and similar discrepancies across the board.
I believe that that's a factor of timing. These allocations are pulled out of our PeopleSoft financial system, so it's what's in the system right now. So they may have made administrative decisions as to the allocations. If it hasn't been changed in PeopleSoft yet, that wouldn't reflect in this report at this time. So my guess is they've made the choice administratively to allocate differently, and it hasn't been done yet on the PeopleSoft system. So my guess is it's a difference in timing of when this sort of snapshot was taken versus the decisions that they've made.
Okay, thanks.
And Mr. Carfang, I do think the item that you noted is part of the Public Works Finance Department's reconciliation or audit of all the accounts. Our program has utilized 4 consultants to provide design, construction oversight, and inspection services per specific categories. And I think, again, seeing a number like this has kind of caused that to appear overstated. So I think that the budget reconciliation project that Finance has just done, when we come back at the next meeting, I think that will pull all that back down to that level and kind of reconcile all that.
That makes sense. It seems fairly standard in most business practices I've seen. So I appreciate it's business as usual.
Any further questions or discussion? I need to receive a motion to receive the Better Streets, Safer Cities Sales Tax Financial Summary Report. I have a motion, second by Anthony. Vote, please. Motion is passed. Thank you very much. Next, 4B, received the 2021 annual report and recommended the City Council receive the report.
Regarding item 4B, we were again blessed to receive assistance from Shannon Cox in assembling the information for the annual report and preparing it in a beautiful, easy-to-follow format. Without going page by page, some of the noteworthy accomplishments can be found starting on page 8. Over the life of the program, 292 miles of resurfacing has resulted in approximately 470,000 tons of asphalt used, 150 intersections improved, 2,000 ADA ramps installed, and 230,000 linear feet of curb and gutter replaced. Page 21 shows that sidewalks provided 29 new connections to schools, 17 to parks, and 66 to bus stops. Moving to page 26, 4 completed trails projects have addressed 22 miles of trails. Above all else, we hope you know our staff's gratitude to the board for making these accomplishments possible. Again, we will be glad to receive any questions or comments that you might have.
I have one question. When, just timing-wise, assuming that these approvals all go through, when would you expect this report to be released?
I think we would take it to the next available city council meeting, Mr. Thompson.
So 45 days or something like that?
I think within that. Mark, is the 24th? Okay, the 24th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions or discussion? I need a motion to receive the 2021 annual report and recommend to the City Council to receive the report. I have a motion and a second. All vote, please. The motion is passed. Thank you very much. Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric Winger, Public Works Director. We've also got Planning Director Jeff Butler today. And I think we just want to reiterate just the progress that has been made. I know that we're seeing fewer meetings, but I think it's only just because we're finding that there's the need for fewer approvals as we come to the tail of the program. Some things that you can expect in the next month with the excess collection allocation today and us making that recommendation to the council. With their approval, we will be coming back then with project recommendations to use those funds that are available to be reallocated to projects. And so staff is putting that together and would be bringing those forward for various projects in July. We've also got some final preliminary reports on projects that are currently in design that are scheduled for your receipt, review, and recommendation through the summer. But we feel that we're on a strong track to have all of the projects except for maybe a couple with the excess allocations all in construction or completed by the end of the year. So there might be a project or two that we might start at the beginning of next year. It perhaps might be one of the street enhancement projects like Automobile Alley that receives some additional allocations of funds to extend that project. So it's just going to take us longer to get the design completed, to get it to construction. But all the other projects that the board has previously authorized are on a fast track for entering into construction or being completed by the end of the year. But with that, as I mentioned, Jeff is also available, but happy to answer any questions that you have today. And I think my other comment, Mr. Thompson, would be too that following the council's approval of the annual report, that's also an item that would be published at the city's website at okc.gov. We also have hard copies that are available if the board wishes to have those. We can have those made available, but it's also in a digital electronic format as well. Thank you.
I think in terms of future projects to consider for allocating the excess funds towards, certainly with the additional couple $1 million for trails, the Deep Fork, being able to get that in motion as much as possible is a significant priority. But with regard to, say, the 59th Street two-way cycle track, I know originally there was consideration to go all the way to Santa Fe, but some difficulties of the logistics around getting under 35 made it a challenge. I do see people walking that anyway. There are desire lines in the grass already, so there is desire for pedestrian infrastructure there. So I wouldn't mind seeing a new assessment of what that might take. And then additionally, I do get a fair amount of comments looking for urgency in connecting Draper to the rest of the trail network. And so seeing what we could do to go from 59th up to Grand is another high priority.
Mr. Carfang, again, kind of back to the earlier comment about connecting various projects. The 59th Street project that the board approved is with ODOT right now. I think they have reviewed 30% plans. NEPA is underway. Kind of we're currently working on that. The planning department, with some foresight, the piece on Eastern between Grand and 59th, they put that in for some of the ARPA money, and it has been funded to a certain level. Maybe it's not enough to complete it, but it kind of at least gets us started on that project. So we can continue to look for opportunities to expand that. The Air Depot Trail that you mentioned is a MAPS project. The subcommittee went back and reviewed that, and that has gone to City Council to authorize negotiation for a design contract for that. We've had conversations with the base in the last week or so about their support for that work, and it was very favorably received.
Good. Well, that's all exciting news. Thanks.
Well, Mitch, so I appreciate your comments about the desire lines. So we've taken note of that. We'll take note of that. We're always open to new suggestions for sidewalk locations or trail locations. Bike Walk OKC, the update is ongoing, and one of the new things that we will have in there is safe corridors and crossings, and I think that certainly would qualify as being a good consideration for that. We want to take a little more notice of these arterials. A lot of them have desire lines. In fact, I noticed in some driving I did last week that there are so many arterials out there that we have desire lines on, where people are actually actively walking, and they're all over the city. So we we want to place a little higher priority on that going forward.
And then just going a little bit further beyond desire lines, I do also notice those who cannot create desire lines in the grass, people in wheelchairs, do go out into the street against traffic. In particular, the one I see most common is from, I think, the mobile homes near Eastern and 59th to the gas station or convenience store. I'm excited for the two-way cycle track on the north side of the road, but that south side, for just a couple hundred yards, something paved there off the actual road would be a huge impact to that community, and I see that daily. So I appreciate you keeping an eye out for all these things.
I do think the report that's being published is very clear. I thought that was a nice way to present all of that, gave a really indication of where the project has been and going. It's nice to know that we're close to the end. But I thought it was a good report, and it's nice to see that clarity published by the city.
And I will echo that too. I'm really excited for once it does get accepted by council to, those diagrams and states and facts are going to be really easy to push in exciting ways on social media too.
Any other comments from the board?
I guess along the same lines, May was National Bike Month, and that was also celebrated and adopted in Oklahoma City as a reflection of all the great work that the city staff is doing and the board is approving and the bond projects and maps. Bike Month here kicked off with a massive effort by Oklahoma City staff and ACOG with Bike Fest on May 1st down at Wheeler Park. And I think Bike Fest a year ago had maybe 400 attendees. This year it was over 1,200. So the momentum just clearly keeps building on itself, and infrastructure is the biggest way to build that momentum. So much appreciation to all of your work.
Do we have any citizens that have requested reporting?
No.
If not, I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, as always, to the city staff and to the council here. Thank you.